Good day, everyone. I am Jessica Angeli Aguilar, and in behalf of the entire Group 1, I welcome you all to our presentation entitled Lesson 1, Introduction to Strategic Management and Strategic Analysis. This lesson presents strategy analysis. This entails the introductory part of strategic management, its concepts, and how managers analyze the firm and manage its assets to gain competitive advantage and be sustainable. I will be giving you a quick overlook on the things that we are going to discuss. So without further ado, let's get started. Our group will be reporting about four subdivided topics, namely strategic management, analyzing the external environment of the firm, assessing the internal environment of the firm, and recognizing a firm's intellectual assets. Now, starting off by discussing one by one the root words of strategic management, let us first define strategy. So, strategy are the ideas, decisions, and actions that enable a firm to succeed. One example of a strategy is online education. As we all know, the pandemic has caused the world to stop, and online education is the strategy of our government for us to be able to continue studying despite the conditions the pandemic has caused us. Moving on to management. Management is the planning, monitoring, analysis and assessment of all necessities an organization needs to meet its goals and objectives. Now, the integration of strategy into management is called strategic management. When we say strategic management, it has three components. First, we have analysis or analysis. Second, decisions. And third are the actions. Let us define them one by one as we go on. So here, analysis or analysis is the detailed examination of anything complex in order to understand its nature or to determine its essential features. So here, we are to scrutinize details on situations that we are currently in, whereas decisions can be defined as a course of action purposely chosen from a set of alternatives to achieve organizational or managerial objectives or goals. So, in layman's term, decisions is deciding as to what actions are we going to take, in which actions is defined as the fact or process of doing something typically to achieve an aim. This is the actualization of the plan. So these three are undertaken by an organization in order to create and sustain competitive advantages. Moving on, here are the key elements of strategic management. So first, strategic management of an organization, as mentioned earlier, entails three ongoing processes, namely analysis, decisions, and actions. Second, the essence of strategic management is to study of why some firms outperform others. So here we are trying to find out why other firms do better than the others. We are trying to leverage our advantages on our favor. And of course, we are aiming for operational effectiveness, or, as I've said earlier, this is performing similar activities better than the rivals. So, in competing in an industry, it is important to know your advantages and how are we going to play our cards right to be able to be better than the others. So, how are we going to do that? Here are some of the key attributes. First, directs the organization toward overall goals and objectives. So, as we move along, we do not just focus on one goal. Instead, we focus our efforts in what is best for the total organization and not just one single functional area. Second, includes multiple stakeholders in decision making. So, stakeholders are those individuals, groups, and organizations that have a stake in the success of the organization, including owners, shareholders in a publicly held organization, employees, customers, suppliers, the community at large, and so on. So it is important to include our stakeholders for us to be able to have better outcomes and better brainstorming when it comes to deciding on the courses of action that we are going to take. Third, needs to incorporate short-term and long-term perspectives. So this relies on the managers in maintaining both a vision for the future of the organization and a focus on its present operating needs. And lastly, recognizes trade-offs between efficiency and effectiveness. So we will be discussing trade-offs later, but first let us differentiate efficiency from effectiveness. This is a simple illustration on how efficiency differs from effectiveness. First, efficiency is doing the things right, whereas effective is doing the right things. Health and quality attributes are critical to be effective, and effectiveness makes us excel, while delivery and cost attributes are critical to be efficient, and efficiency keeps you in the market. On the first illustration, it shows how being effective and efficient is. So here we have correct and quick response to the situation, while effective but inefficient means correct response but slow in progress, and ineffective but efficient means doing the wrong service at a quick response. Ineffective and inefficient means doing the wrong service at a very slow pace time. Moving on, these are the musts on how to be a successful manager. First, as mentioned earlier, this is doing trade-offs, or the central to the practice of strategic management means knowing what is the best decision or choosing the best options among the other ones. So in trade-offs, we are to give up some opportunities in choosing one. Hence, this is very vital, especially for the managers, to choose what is right and best for the situations that we are currently in. Sometimes, this decides if our operations will be successful or not. Next is focus on the short term and efficiency. For example, short term decisions could include whether to resolve staff shortages by using agency staff. So here, the small problems or the urgent problems are focused on. Quick responses are needed in these situations. And lastly, emphasis on long-term decisions. So as we all know, making short-term decisions, if done consistently, gives us long-term decision effectiveness. For example, if we maintain good consistent short-term decision making, rest assured we will be staying on the business for a long run. And an example of a long-term decision is expanding a firm's product market scope in order to anticipate opportunities in the competitive environment. Moving on, we now have the strategic management process, which will be discussed further by my group mates as we go on in the discussion, but let me just define it for you briefly. So first, we have strategy analysis. This is the study of firms' external and internal environments and their fit with their organizational vision and goals. Next is strategy formulation. The decisions made by firms regarding investments, commitments, and other aspects of operations that create and sustain competitive advantage. Next is strategy implementation. The actions made by firms that carry out the formulated strategy, including strategic controls, organizational design, and leadership. So in strategy analysis, we are currently studying the situation that we have. Now we are trying to understand as why these happenings occur and what are the factors that affect this occurrence. While in strategy formulation, we are trying to look for solutions, or we are trying to know more on the options that we have to be able to resolve the conflicts that we may be having, or to be able to create a better platform for us to excel in. And in strategy implementation, this will be the carrying out of our formulated strategies, hence the actualization of our plans. Now, these three are highly interdependent and do not take place one after the other in a sequential fashion in most companies. Each one of them are as important as the other and should be executed properly for, of course, for best outcomes. This is a checklist of how we should execute them. Under strategy analysis, analyzing organizational goals and objectives, analyzing the external environment of the firm, assessing the internal environment of the firm, and assessing a firm's intellectual assets. Under strategy formulation, we should be formulating business level strategy, formulating corporate level strategy, and formulating international strategy. While under strategy implementation, we have strategic control and corporate governance, creating effective organizational designs, creating a learning organization and an ethical organization, and lastly, fostering corporate entrepreneurship. So as we see, this is a process that are interdependent and should be done simultaneously. For us to get the best outcome that we want, we should execute them properly on their best state. This is just an overlook of how they should be accomplished and hence should be discussed by the next reporters as we go on. That would be all for my part and thank you very much for listening.
Great morning! I am Kenji Balitaw, member of Group 1, and I will be presenting these following topics. First, we have the role of corporate governance and stakeholder management. Second, the strategic management perspective. Third, ensuring coherence in strategic decision. So first, we have the role of corporate governance and stakeholder management. In this topic, we will answer the question, how does corporate governance and stakeholder management affect the strategic management? Not just the strategic management, but the whole corporation. So to answer that question, let us first define what is corporate governance. So when we say corporate governance, it is the relationship of various participants in determining the direction and performance of corporation. The primary participants are the shareholders, management, and board of directors. So it means that corporate governance is the internal rules and policies that are used to determine how a company is directed and controlled. Of course, the setting of rules and policies will steer by the three main pillars mentioned in this picture: the management, shareholders, and board of directors. Lastly, corporate governance is important in making appropriate strategic decisions to achieve organizational objectives and goals. So in addition, these are the functions of the main participants. First, the board of directors. They are the one who decides important issues and develop long-term strategies for the corporation. Second, the shareholders. They can participate on corporate governance by voting on important issues. And lastly, the managers. They are the one who carry out day-to-day directions. Next one, aside from the fact that corporate governance helps an organization in having a better communication and creating an appropriate strategic decision, here are some other reasons why it is important and needed by an organization. Integrity and ethics, which means moral obligation that guides corporate behavior. Corporate governance also gives equal treatment of shareholders by exercising the rights of stakeholders through constant and open communication. Number three, the visibility of errors, quickly identifying errors on the process. And lastly, the compliance, which is the specifications and working correctly. So next, we will tackle the role of stakeholder management. When we say stakeholder management, it is a firm's strategy for recognizing and responding to the interests of its salient stakeholders. It's all about managing the expectation of anyone that has an interest in the organization. So example of stakeholders, we have the customers, sponsors, employees, and creditors. So as you can see, these are the two new ways of thinking for organization that focuses on considering their stakeholders and evaluating their performances. Stakeholder management focuses on the expectation of its stakeholders or anyone that has an interest in the corporation. So the corporation or organization made a two new way of thinking that will satisfy the expectation of those stakeholders. So first, we have the social responsibility. So when we say social responsibility, it is the expectation that businesses or individuals will strive to improve the overall welfare of society. It is a act in a manner that benefits society. It is also a duty to act in the best interest of their environment. Next one, the other ways of thinking that new ways of thinking that the organization has made is the triple bottom line. So triple bottom line is the assessment of a firm's financial, social, and environmental performances. So it is used to evaluate performance in broader aspects. So those broader aspects such as social, environmental, and financial. So those dimensions are also called three P's: the people, planet, and profit. People for social, planet for environmental, and profit for financial. Next one, we have the strategic management perspective. So strategic management requires managers to take an integrative view of the organization and assess how all the functional areas and activities fit together to help an organization achieve its goals and objectives. So in a strategic management perspective, everyone must be involved in a strategic management process. Next one is the critical need for three types of leaders. So these are the three types of leaders that can help in strategic management process of an organization. First, we have the local line leaders who have significant profit and loss responsibility. It means they are the kind of leaders who can experiment with new capabilities to see if they actually improve business results when implemented. Second one, we have the executive leaders who champion and guide ideas, creating a learning infrastructure and establish a domain for taking action. Then lastly, we have the internal networkers who, although they have little positional power and formal authority, generate their power through conviction and clarity of their ideas. So internal workers, they are the staffers who help with experiments, share new information, and learn with others in the organization. For the last topic, we have ensuring coherence in strategic decision. So it is all about knowing what the firm is striving to accomplish its goals and objectives. Everyone should know the objective from the top management to the lower management to be able to assure that they will succeed on what they are planning to achieve by having effective communication, of course, and proper making of strategic decisions. So for the next slide, you will see Alan Mulally, former CEO at Ford Motor Company, quoting these statements. He stressed the importance of perspective in creating a sense of mission. First, what are we? What is our real purpose? So this statement is pertaining on what is the organization's objectives and goals, and they must know what are those goals to achieve it. Second, how do you include everybody so you know where you are on that plan so you can work on areas that need special attention. So in this part, he is pertaining to the everyone must work together to achieve a certain goal, not just the top management, but everyone, including the lower management. So it is important to know your goal and objectives and working together. to achieve your desired result. Lastly, we have the hierarchy of goals in connection to the ensuring of coherence in strategic management. So when we say hierarchy of goals, it is the organizational goals ranging from the top management, those those that are less specific yet able to evoke powerful and compelling mental images, to at the bottom those that are more specific and measurable. So under hierarchy of goals, we have the vision, mission statement, and strategic objective. So when we say vision, it is the organizational goals that evoke powerful and compelling mental images. Vision focuses on tomorrow and what the organization wants to become, what you want to accomplish, what the organization wants to accomplish in the future. Next one is the mission statement, a set of organizational goals that identifies the purpose of the organization, its basis of competition and competitive advantage. So when we say mission statement, it focuses today and what the organization does. So it is a general statement on how will you achieve your vision. Lastly, we have the strategic objectives, a set of organizational goals that are used to put into practice the mission statement and that are specific and cover a well-defined time frame. It is a series of ways using the mission to achieve the vision. As you can notice, from vision to strategic objectives, it is a general goal to specific goal, a long-term goal to a short-term goal. That's all for my report. Thank you for listening.
Good day, everyone. This is Joanna Anaya, and today I will be discussing to you how business people analyzes the external environment of the firm. So, organization or management is always expected to have wise decision making when it comes to the whole operation of the firm. Of course, for the firm to go on a long way. And one critical step included is analyzing the external environment of the firm. So, as we go along on our discussion, we will understand how managers or people in the industry makes an environmentally aware organization. So, let's start. Analyzing the external environment is a critical move in understanding the future operation of the firm. So, since these are composed of outside factors, the firm is under no control over this. Now, as you can see in the picture attached, we have here 7 external environmental factors, which are technological, economic, political or legal, demographic, social, competitive, and global. According to Booz& Company, 66% of new products fail within 2 years, while according to Dublin Group, an astonishing 96% of all innovations fail to deliver any return on a company's investment. So this is due to the several external factors affecting the firm, such as not keeping on the speed of the trends and ending up with a bad decision making. So we can see how external environmental factors deeply affects the whole operation of the firm. That is why managers are always asked to end up with the best strategy and decision for the firm. So the question is, what is external environment? So the external environment plays a critical role in shaping the future of entire industries and those of individual businesses. So these are composed of all the outside factors, influences, forces, and situations that impact the operation of the business. Now the business must act or react for it to keep up its flow of operations. It is also said that the external environment has an indirect influence on the business operation, and these factors are uncontrollable by the business. So here are the 7 external environmental factors. So first off, economic. So when we say economic factors, these are the forces that affects the economy, such as economic inflation or economic recession. Next is political or legal factor, which includes policies and laws. Example is changing in ruling or changing in regulations. Another is demographic factor. Now this forces talks about statistics, such as demographic trends. Next is social. This influences the culture and consumer behavior. Examples are lifestyle, and influences. Another is global factors. It includes forces affecting the global economy, such as global recession. And lastly, technological, which focuses on the emerging technological advancement. Now, moving on, we will talk about the role of managers in analyzing the external environment. So, to keep the business ahead of the competition, managers must adjust the strategies in able to reflect the environment in which the business operates. So, this is a useful exercise to do an external analysis at the start of the strategy review process. Now, here are some of the roles that managers place in the firm. So, first off, managers must recognize opportunities and threats in the firm's external environment. One must be aware of what's going outside the company. So managers should always do a review and analysis on what is happening beyond what the firm cannot control. This is to make sure that the firm can adapt to the changes or things that is happening outside. Next is, managers should have the ability to sense what is coming before the fog clears. This ability is called perceptual acuity, which means managers should sense what is coming and act immediately before others do so, which makes it is a competitive advantage. And lastly, managers must adjust the strategies to reflect the environment in which their business operates. Since the business industry is running in a fast pace, adjusting and creating strategies or approaches is needed for the business to continuously operate. Now, how do we analyze the external environment? So, first, understanding all the environmental factors before moving to the next step. So, of course, in doing an external analysis, we first understand what are the environmental factors and how it affects the firm. So, we must familiarize ourselves on the different external environmental factors. Second, collect all the relevant information. So, gathering the relevant data needed is essential for us to know all the information that we will be using for the external analysis. One must note that the data that will be collected should focus only on the environment of the firm. Next is identifying the opportunities for your organization. Since we are then gathering all the necessary data, it is time to collect the information that the firm can use for its growth. And lastly, recognizing the threats your company faces. So this is one of the most important reasons why we do external analysis, for the firm to recognize the possible threats that the firm may face, and also for the management to come up with possible solutions. So why do we develop business forecasts? The reason is that forecasting is valuable to businesses so that they can make informed business decisions. So this is a vital step for a company's success or failure. So we can see here the three important processes used to develop forecasts, which are environmental scanning, environmental monitoring, and competitive intelligence. So first off, environmental scanning. So environmental scanning is a process that systematically surveys and interprets relevant data to identify external opportunities and threats that could influence the future decisions of the firm. So the basic purpose of environmental scanning is to help management determine the future direction of the firm. So we can do reading secondary sources such as web articles, newspapers, magazine, and journal literature. Next is environmental monitoring. So companies need to monitor the external environment in order to identify potentially disruptive changes and respond to them before it's too late. It appears that many firms still monitor the environment by using practices, tools, and techniques that were developed in the post-war era when the outside environment was not as volatile and fast-changing as it is today. So environmental monitoring is a firm's analysis of the external environment that tracks the evolution of environmental trends, sequences of events, or streams of activities. Now, lastly, competitive intelligence. So, when we say competitive intelligence, it means understanding and learning what is happening in the world outside your business so you can be as competitive as possible. It means learning as much as possible, as soon as possible, about your industry in general, your competitors, or even your country's particular zoning rules. So, the goal of competitive intelligence is to be able to make smart and strategic decisions with that information. Now we have here environmental forecasting. So environmental forecasting is attempting to predict the nature and intensity of the microenvironmental and macroenvironmental forces that are likely to affect a firm's decision making and have an impact upon its performance in a given period. So environmental forecasting, this is a technique whereby managers attempt to predict the future characteristics of the organizational environment and make decisions today that will help the firm deal with the environment of tomorrow. Now we have here the scenario analysis. So scenario analysis is a way of predicting future values based on certain potential events. So this is primarily used to evaluate the pros and cons of organizational decisions. When we say scenario analysis, it is an in depth approach to environmental forecasting, which involves expert detailed assessment of societal trends, economics, politics, technology, or other dimensions of the external environment. Ultimately, the use of scenario analysis can help insurers to avoid making poor decisions and to identify growth opportunities that could increase the return on equity and reduce income volatility. Now, down to our last topic, which is the SWOT analysis. So, we are very much familiar with this topic since we are tackling about this in every aspect of marketing. But then again, to refresh your minds, SWOT analysis is a strategic planning technique used to help a person or organization to identify its strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats related to business competition or project planning. So, the general idea of SWOT analysis is that a firm's strategy must build on its strengths, remedy the weaknesses or work around them, take advantage of opportunities, and protect the firm from the threats. So, when we say strengths, these are internal, positive attributes of your company. So, these are the things that are within your control. While weaknesses are negative factors that detracts from your strength. These are the things that you might need to work for you to be competitive. Now, opportunities are external factors in your business environment that are likely to contribute to your success. And threats, these are external factors that you have no control over. So, you may want to consider putting in place contingency plans for dealing with them if they occur. So, that would be all. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. I am Jamil Bandi, and I'm going to report about the general environment, its factors, the tools used for analyzing its trends and events, and its importance for the business competitive advantage. General environment. An organization's environment includes factors that it can readily affect as well as factors that has a largely lay beyond a firm's control. So this set of factors are said to exist within the general environment. Because the general environment often has a substantial influence on an organization's level of success, the executive must track trends and events as they evolve and try to anticipate these kinds of applications. Next, pestle analysis. So here, by examining the general environment, you must have a clear understanding about the key factors and trends in a broader society. And here is believed to be one of the best frameworks for organizing these factors and trends, which is the pestle analysis. Pestle analysis helps an organization identify the external forces that could impact their market and analyze how they could directly impact their business. So it's important when undertaking the such analysis that the factors affecting the organizations are not just identified but are also assessed. Like for example, what impact they might have on the organization. Next. For the first factor is political. These factors are all about how and to what degree a government intervenes in the economy or a certain industry. So basically, all the influences that a government has on your business could be classified here. This can include government policy, political stability or instability, corruption, foreign trade policy, tax policy, labor law, environmental law, and trade restrictions. So for my example is about the ABS-CBN officially shut down, which is here it said that by voting not to renew the expired franchise of ABS-CBN, an overwhelming majority of lawmakers silenced a major network that had come under fire from the President Rodrigo Duterte. These shutdowns leads to its company 11,000 employees lose their job. Also, it caused financial blowback to ABS-CBN in the first 6 months after the pandemic and the Duterte administration's closure of the network's free television and radio channel left revenue stream drying up. So for the next factor is economic. Economic factors are determinants of a certain economy's performance. It includes economic growth, exchange rates, inflation rates, interest rates, disposal income of consumers, and unemployment rates. These factors may have direct or indirect long-term impact on a company, since it affects the purchasing power of consumers and could possibly change demand or supply models in the economy. So for my example is the unemployment rate happening right now in our industry. Unemployment rate in July 2020 was estimated at 10%, equivalent to almost 4.6 million jobless Filipinos. PSA said on Thursday, September 3, this kind of calamity that we're facing right now may result to an economic downturn. Social factors focus on social environment and identify emerging trends. In addition, it also says about the local workforce and its willingness to work under certain conditions. It includes population trends. So for my example is about the physical distancing in public transport and its effect on drivers. Social distancing effects on startups. So here in the Philippines, operators and drivers rely on fares for their income. In the case of the city buses, many drivers still earn on a commission basis. In the case of jeepneys and tricycles, the vehicle are sometimes rented from the owner and the driver gets to keep leftover profit after paying the boundary and fuel cost. So next is the technological factors. These factors pertains or being to innovations in technology and that may affect the operations of the industry and the market favorably or unfavorably. These factors may influence decisions to enter or not to enter certain industries, to launch or not to launch a certain products. So for my examples is about the recent update about the ICT and its role in helping the business today. This pandemic presented us the value of technology and in its innovation. It served as the medium for remote working, collaboration of the business, and education. So, with the most of the people studying and working from home now, it boosts the demand for laptops, gadgets, internet bandwidth, and other work from home peripherals. Environmental factors relate to the influence of the surrounding environment and the impact of the ecological aspects. It involves the physical conditions within which organizations operate. This includes ecological and environmental aspects such as weather, climate, environmental offsets, and climate change, which may especially affect industries such as tourism, farming, and insurance. So for my example is the update about the Manila Bay rehabilitation. According to Manila Mayor Isko Moreno, he says that it's nice to have a rehabilitation and beautification of the Manila Bay shoreline, saying it will attract more tourists and investors. So next factor is legal. So here, the legal segment centers on how the court influences business activity. And organizations must understand what is legal allowed within the territories they operate in. And they also must be aware of any change in legislation and the impact this may have on the business operations. So, factors include employment legislation, consumer law, health and safety, internationalization, as well as trade regulation and restrictions. So, for my example, is the Manila lockdown cripples business big and small. Here, drastic quarantine measures imposed on the Philippines capital Manila left many of the city's busiest shopping centers virtually empty over the weekend, dealing a major blow to the country's economy, where major malls were ordered closed, with mass gatherings also banned, with hundreds of flights into the city canceled daily. Gambling in Manila's four resorts casinos suspended, and restrictions on the trading of financial securities sectors. Next. So next is the competitive environment. Here, competitive environment is the dynamic external system in which a business competes and functions. So the more sellers of a similar product or services, the more competitive the environment in which you compete. And there are two types of competitors in a competitive environment, which is the direct competitors and the indirect competitors. For the direct competitors, business that are selling here, the business that are selling the same type of product or services. Example is like McDo or Jollibee and Jollibee. So next is the indirect competitors. So here, businesses that still compete even though they sell different products or services. Like for example, the transportation. Like for me, I can rather use planes or I can rather use a bus for my transportation. Next is Michael Porter's five forces. So here, it allows businesses managers to gauge the level of competition within their company's industries and thus assess current and potential lines of businesses. So the ultimate goal of this analysis is to help the managers set their profitability expectations because the profitability decreases as competition increases. So Michael Porter- Porter's five forces here is my example. So the first force analysis is the threat of new participants in the marketplace. So if an entry is easy, then these factors indicates a high level of competition in the industry. For the second factor, evaluates the number of activity of a company's rival. However, the manager needed to assess the likelihood that any one rival can dominate the market industry. So next is the third factor, which is the threat of substitute products or services. So coming into the market and eroding sales of the established products. For the fourth factor is the bargaining power of suppliers. So if there are few suppliers who provide a set of resource, competition may get heavy for that resource, thus increasing costs and eroding profits. For the fifth and final factor is the bargaining power of buyers. So, if the consumer has a strong bargaining position, then this will drive down the prices for the finished goods and erode profitability. Next is the industry analysis. So here, it is a types of business function done by business owners in order to evaluate status of the business environment. The industry analysis reports help business owners understand the different economic pieces and where they can use these pieces to gain a competitive environment. So that is for my report today, and thank you.
Greetings everyone, I'm Joshua Dorado and I'm going to discuss about the first part of assessing the internal environment of the film. In this lecture, you will understand the importance of the internal environment of the film. It will give you an idea on how to identify the internal forces of the company that contributes to its competitive and sustainable advantage. Now, how do we add value to our business? We can efficiently deliver value to our customers by following Michael Porter's value chain analysis. Value chain analysis views the organization as a sequential process of value creating activities. Such an approach is useful for understanding the building blocks of competitive advantage. Value, on the other hand, is the amount that buyers are willing to pay for what the firm provides them. The idea of value chain analysis came originally from Michael Porter, where he splits the entire business into two activities. First is the primary activities and the support activities. The primary activities are sequential activities of the value chain that refer to the physical creation of the product or service, its sale and transfer to the buyer, and its service after sale. Support activities are activities of the value chain that either add value by themselves or add value through important relationships with both primary activities and other support activities. We can see in the illustration the five generic categories of primary activities that are directly involved in the production and selling of the actual product. These are the inbound logistics, operations, outbound logistics, marketing and sales and service. You can also see the second category is the support activities that aim to coordinate their functions as best as possible with primary activities. And these are procurement, technology development, human resource management, and general administration or firm infrastructure. Let's address the primary activities. First is inbound logistics. Inbound logistics is about receiving goods, storing and distributing inputs of a product. Inbound logistics involves activities that includes getting the right raw material in. Second is operations. Operations are all activities that are associated with transforming inputs into the final product form. It includes transforming and converting raw materials and components into new finished products. Third is outbound logistics. Outbound logistics is about collecting, storing, distributing the product or service to buyers. Outbound logistics involves activities associated with order processing, packaging, shipping, everything which deals with the distribution of the finished product to the buyers. Fourth is the marketing and sales. These are activities associated with purchases of products and services by end users and the inducements used to get them to make purchase. Marketing and sales involves activities with providing the customer with information about the product's uniqueness and quality, which should lead to sale. Marketing and sales are involving determining the product's distribution channel, pricing, promotion, and personal selling. Fifth is service. Service are actions associated with providing service to enhance or maintain the value of the product. Service involves activities which ensure that the purchased product enhances and maintains the value for the customer. Next, let's address the support activities. First is the procurement. Procurement involves the function of purchasing inputs used in the firm's value chain, including raw materials, supplies, and other consumable items. Procurement supports all the primary activities. It includes the establishment of procurement routines for the purchase of raw materials in inbound logistics. It also includes the negotiations about purchasing of energy in service of the machines in operations, buying new cars for the delivery of goods as part of your in outbound logistics. Second is technology development. Technology development are activities associated with the development of new knowledge that is applied to the firm's operations. Technology development is the overall system that provides an overview of the entire organizations. The marketing and sales department have the opportunity to see whether the product that they are trying to find are out of stock or not. Third, human resource management. These are activities involved in the recruitment, hiring, training, development, and compensation of all types of personnel. It is the HR's department's responsibility that the right skills are available at the right time in various departments. For example, before the marketing and sales contact the first potential customers in Japan, HR department helps with hiring a person who understands the Japanese language and their culture. Fourth is the film infrastructure. Infrastructure involves general management, planning, finance, accounting, legal and government affairs, quality management, and information systems, and also the activities that support the entire value chain and not individual activities. Film infrastructure, also known as general administration, covers all the other activities. It supports both primary and support activities. Now here is an example of the use of the value chain with the manufacturer of blades for wind turbines. Now let's first review the primary activities. A manufacturer receives inbound logistics through raw materials, and it is to be included in the creation of the blade later. In operations, the raw material shall hereafter be part of the operations in which the blade is being produced or created. And when the finished turbine blade is transported by truck, it is now part of the primary activity outbound logistics. And in marketing and sale, it is probably due to the quality, durability, etc. that we have convinced the buyer about the value of our blades and therefore they purchased it. Next is service. In service, the maintenance is important. The maintenance of the blade is part of the primary activity service. Next, let's review the support activities. Support activity procurement has been probably helpful in preparing contracts for the purchase of raw materials in inbound logistics, agreement with trucking company on transportation of the blade in outbound logistics, as well as established procedures for purchase of flights and hotels. Next is the support activity technology development has probably been helpful by calculating the need for raw material in the blade in operations, plans for when, and they also plan for when the individual blades are delivered in outbound logistics. Next is human resource management. Human resource management have hopefully had a share in all other activities below them. Example would be the blades that are delivered offshore. And here they must make sure that the people have the right training in relation to the rules of working at sea or on air. Next is firm infrastructure. Firm infrastructure support activity general administration supports the other activities. Firm infrastructure is the support system of both primary and support activities. And now let's move on to the interrelationships. Managers must not ignore the importance of relationships among value chain activities. And there are two levels. First is the interrelationships among activities within the firm, and the relationships among activities within the firm and with other stakeholders. In the interrelationships among activities within the firm, it pertains about the collaborative and strategic exchange relationships between the value chain activities. The strategic exchange relationships involves exchanges of resources such as information, and in the relationships among activities within the firm and with other stakeholders, people including customers and suppliers are part of the firm's expanded value chain. The management should consider integrating customers into the value chain by creating individualized products or soliciting ideas for products and services. Firms can also leverage the power of crowdsourcing. Crowdsourcing occurs when firms taps into the knowledge and ideas of a large number of customers and other stakeholders.
Great morning, I am Jemima Domanais. Now let's begin talking about resource-based view, which is also referred to as RBV. But before we begin, let me present these questions to you. What leads to differential firm performance? Why does one firm outperform its competitors? And what makes your company more successful than mine? RBV was developed by hundreds of scholars like Barney, Prahalad, and Wernefeld. Over time, it is continued to evolve and adapt to the ever-changing corporate landscape. RBV has an internal firm focus and advocates that competitive advantage achieved by exploiting internal firm capabilities rather than external factors. A resource is a competitive asset that is owned or controlled by a company. And a capability is the capacity of a company to completely perform some internal activities. Capabilities are developed and enabled through the deployment of company resources. There are three types of firm resources, which are tangible, intangible, and organizational capabilities. Resources can be tangible or intangible. Although we all learn of what it means, let's more specifically define these terms, give some examples, and talk about each of their importance. First, tangible resources refer to physical things that we can all see and touch, like land, building, equipment. These types of resources can provide an advantage, but that advantage is often short-term because tangible resources are often purchased in open markets. On the other hand, intangible resources have no physical presence. We cannot see or touch intangible resources. These are things like skills, capabilities, know-how, or processes expertise. Intangible resources takes time to develop and they cannot be easily purchased in an open market. Next, organizational capabilities are developed and enabled through the department of a company's resources or some combination of its resources. Some capabilities rely heavily on a company's intangible resources such as human assets and intellectual capital. Next, competitive test. What is the most telling about a company's aggregation of resources and capabilities is how powerful they are in the marketplace. Resource-based logic suggests that firms rely on both tangible and intangible resources that are assumed to be heterogeneous and immobile. Firm resources must also have certain attributes in order to provide competitive advantage. Those attributes are valuable, rare, inimitable, and non-substitutable, or VRIN. Quite simply, resources are valuable if they help a company reduce cost, increase differentiation in a way that creates value for customers. Resources also need to be rare, and by that, I mean resources cannot be widely available to competitors because if everyone has a resource, then it is impossible for it to drive differential firm performance and competitive advantage. Resources must also be inimitable, that is, they must be difficult or costly to imitate, so competitors cannot easily copy and implement your strategic approach. Resources also need to be non-substitutable, that means they cannot be replaced by other readily available resources, or at a minimum, they must be costly for rivals to find the substitutable resource. The reason that resources need to be valuable, rare, inimitable, and unsubstitutable is so that they could be used towards competitive advantage. Resources and capabilities must be continually strengthened and nurtured to sustain their competitive advantage. Competitive advantage happens when companies implement a value-creating strategy that competitors are not using. This can provide superior performance relative to other competitors in the exact same industry. That is the essence of competitive advantage and the goal of RBV logic. Next, evaluating firm performance. There are two approaches to use when evaluating a firm's performance. The first one is the financial ratio analysis. It is a way of comparing the relationships between two or more financial terms. There are 5 types of financial ratios. The first one is the short-term ratio. These ratios are used to measure a company's short-term liquidity. The main concern is the company's ability to pay its bill in the short run without any undue stress. Current ratio, it is calculated as current assets divided by current liabilities. To creditors, the higher the current ratio, the less risky it will be to lend money. A high current ratio can indicate liquidity. Next, quick ratio is calculated as current ratio minus inventory over current liabilities. The purpose of the quick ratio is to measure whether or not a company could pay off its current liabilities if they were to come due today. Next, cash ratio. The cash ratio is even more conservative than the quick ratio. It measures cash over liability. The short-term creditor may be extremely interested in this ratio. The next is the long-term ratio. This ratio measures a firm's ability to meet its obligation or its financial leverage. Total debt ratio. The total debt ratio takes into account all debts to all creditors. The formula is total assets minus total equity over total assets. One variation of a total debt ratio is the debt equity ratio, and it equals total debt over total equity. We can calculate this by pulling the number off the balance sheet, or we can use the ratios that are already derived from the total debt ratio. Next is the equity multiplier, and it equals total assets over total equity. Another ratio to measure long-term solvency is the times interested solvency, also known as the TIE ratio. It is calculated by dividing earnings before interest and tax by interest. The cash coverage ratio is another measure of how a company can pay its interest. However, unlike the TIE ratio, it takes into consideration the fact that the depreciation and amortization are non-cash expenses. It is defined as earning before interest and tax plus depreciation amortization divided by interest. Next, turnover ratio. They are often called asset management ratios. They are intended to describe how efficiently and intensively a firm uses its asset to generate revenues. The first is the inventory turnover ratio. Measures how many times in a year a company sells its inventory, calculated as cost of goods sold divided by inventory. Once you have the inventory turnover ratio, you can then figure out how long it took on average to turn the inventory over. You do this with a ratio called the day sales in inventory, calculated by using 365 divided by the inventory turnover ratio. The receivables turnover. It is a ratio that measures how fast a company collects its credit sales. It is calculated as sales divided by account receivables. Total asset turnover. It is more of a focusing of the big picture ratio. This ratio measures how much revenues are generated for each dollar in asset. In other words, how efficiently is management using the assets calculated by sales divided by total asset. Next, profitability measures all have the main purpose of measuring how efficiently the firm manages its operation and asset. Profit margin equals net income divided by sales. Measures what percentage of sale is profit. Next, return of assets measures the profit of a company of each dollar in asset that it's owned, calculated by net income divided by total asset. Return of equity measures how well the company performed relative to its equity, calculated by net income divided by total equity. Next, market value measures. Measures there is information that we need to obtain that is not readily available on the financial statements. These measures are only for publicly traded companies. Earnings per share measures how much value the company generates per share, calculated by net income over outstanding shares. The PE ratio is defined as price per share divided by earnings per share. Market to book ratio measures how many times over investors are willing to pay for a stock relative to the stock book value. It is calculated by market value per share divided by book value per share. The next approach will be discussed by Mr. Dorado.
Second is Balanced Scorecard. Balanced Scorecard is a strategic performance management system that has three components. It helps the company to set their strategic goal, define their action plan, develop metrics that will help them monitor the delivery of their strategic goals. Balanced Scorecard has four perspectives. And across these four perspectives, you define your goals, action plan, and metrics. The first perspective is financial. As a business, what do you want to achieve? Do you want to make money, deliver profit, grow revenue, etc.? Here you have to define your financial goals. Second perspective is customer. Here you need to figure out what you need to deliver to your customers. Who are your customers or your target market? Third is the internal processes. You have to figure out what is your focus. What do you now need to be really good at internally as a business? What are the key areas you need to focus on to deliver to your customers and ultimately deliver financial resources which involve marketing, product development, etc. Fourth perspective is the innovation and learning. It is the enabler of your company. It focuses on human capital like recruitment and training, organizational capital like organizational culture, leadership, structure of your business, and information capital like your data or technology development and your IT infrastructure and so on.
Good evening, everyone. I am Isabel Ernesto, and I'm here to discuss recognizing a firm's intellectual asset. In this topic, we will discuss how good is the organization at attracting top talents and leveraging that talent to produce a stream of products and services valued by the marketplace. This lesson will also address how human capital can be leveraged in an organization and the important roles of social capital and technology. So we have human capital. Human capital is the firm's intellectual asset. The firm's people or staff showcase their knowledge, abilities, skills, education, or simply what they've learned from school, trainings, experience, judgment, wisdom, and creativity.
for them to be able to work effectively. So there, human capital as the firm's intellectual assets. Next is we have the central role of knowledge. Since we already discussed human resources or human capital, let's now proceed on tangible and intangible resources. This too is where the managers focus on. So the tangible resources or simply immaterial resources are physical assets such as land, equipment, money. Intangible resources, or on the other hand, it is a non-material resources do not exist in physical form such as brands, image, customer loyalty, and patent. Then we have four traditional factors of production, namely labor, capital, land, and enterprise. So for land, land is simply the natural resources available for production. Then we have enterprise. Enterprise is simply the organization and undertaking production. Then we have labor. Labor is the human skills and effort. Lastly is capital. Capital, on the other hand, is not money but equipment and materials or simply goods used in the supply of products. So there, the traditional factors of production, labor, capital, land, and enterprise. Then we have knowledge workers. Nowadays, the knowledge workers segment is growing dramatically. Knowledge workers are those jobs requires them to think for a living, including programmers, physicians, pharmacists, architects, engineers, scientists, design thinkers, public accountants, lawyer, and academics. Academics are professors or teachers and any other white-collar workers whose line of work requires one to think for a living. Then we have knowledge economy. For knowledge economy, it is an economy in which growth is dependent on the quantity, quality, and accessibility of the information available rather than the means of production. Example of activities under knowledge economy are research, technical support, and consulting. Here we have three types of workers. We have the knowledge workers, information or task workers. Lastly is the service workers. So as you can see, knowledge workers are those workers who work with action or they interact and they work with information. They also have unstructured process, they have undefined outcomes, and they have personal workflow. Example are engineers, executive salespeople, and managers. Second, we have information or task workers. They have unstructured process with information controlling flow. They also have defined outcomes and they have no personal workflow. For example, contact center agents or call center agents, bank tellers, nurses, and policemen. Lastly is service workers. Service workers, they have a structured process. They do not use information to structure their job and the information is only gathered as you can see in the picture. Example are hotel maids, UPS driver, refuse engineers, and taxi drivers. Next, we have key terms. On the key terms, these are the key terms of my topic. So we have intellectual capital, human capital, social capital, explicit knowledge, and tacit knowledge. So since we already discussed intellectual capital, it is the difference between the market value of the firm and the book value of the firm. So it includes assets such as reputation, employee loyalty, and commitment, and so on and so forth. So human capital, on the other hand, the individual capabilities, knowledge, skills, and expertise of the company's employees and managers. Social capital, they are the network of friendship and working relationship between talented people, both inside and outside the organization. So later on, we'll discuss that. Explicit knowledge and tacit knowledge, they also another one. Aside from explicit knowledge and tacit knowledge, we also have implicit knowledge. So first of all, what is explicit knowledge? Explicit knowledge is knowledge that is easy to articulate, write down, and share. For example, when data is processed, organized, structured, and interpreted, the result is explicit knowledge. On the other hand, implicit knowledge is the practical application of explicit knowledge. Implicit knowledge, on the other hand, is or are the skills that are transferable from one job to another one, are example of implicit. So lastly, we have tacit knowledge. Tacit knowledge, as you can see from the definition here, knowledge that is in the minds of employees and is based on their experiences and backgrounds. Tacit knowledge is the background or experiences you've learned in your past years. Next, we have human capital, the foundation of intellectual capital. So before a firm have intellectual capital or intellectual capital, we have the intellectual capacities or the human capital, human resources. They need to fill off their human capital first. So how are they going to gain human resources? First is attracting human capital. So in attracting human capital, which includes recruiting or hiring, and in how or what ways they're going to attract their human resources, it depends on the firm's strategy. So here we have hire for attitude, train for skills, sound recruiting approaches and networking, and attracting millennials, those who are in need of jobs. Next, we have developing human capital. Under developing human capital, of course, after the recruitment or hiring process, there goes the human capital development, in which the firms conduct different seminars, training programs, and workshops to help their staff to adapt in the environment that will also benefit the firm. So in order for them to develop their human capital or their human resources, simply our staffs or employees, they need to conduct some seminars, trainings in order for their human capital to retain the knowledge that they learn or they gain from their past years. So encouraging widespread involvement, mentoring, monitoring progress and tracking development, and evaluating human capital. So as a manager, as the employer, it is your responsibility to give mentoring or seminars or some workshop training programs to your staffs or human capital, human resources. Lastly, we have retaining human capital. In order to retain your employees, a firm must at least give them a good offer in exchange of their hard work. Examples are recognizing their effort by giving incentives in a form of financial or non-financial rewards. So here we have identifying with an organization's mission and values, challenging work, and a stimulating environment. Lastly is financial and non-financial rewards and incentives. Everything in here includes in retaining human capital because your human capital needs some encouragement in order for them to stay with you through the hardship inside your organization or inside the company.
Great morning, everyone. This is Cherime Okelagi, and I will be reporting the vital role of social capital. Since we are referring humans as the capital or human capital, their talent and development is indeed an asset, but it is not sufficient to be called as creating competitive advantage. So what is social capital? Social capital is a set of shared values that allows individuals to work together in a group to effectively achieve a common purpose. So social capital is composed of human sense of belonging, networks, bonding, bridging, feelings of trust and safety, reciprocity, participation, citizen power, values, norms, outlook in life, and diversity. The development of social capital gains importance because it helps tie knowledge workers to a given firm. In order to do that, the company needs to find ways to create ties among its knowledge workers. Here are the four ways: social network analysis, bridging relationships, structural holes, and closure. Social network analysis is an analysis of the pattern of social interactions among individuals. It is the mapping and measuring of relationships and flows between people, groups, organizations, computers, URLs, and other connected information or knowledge entities. Example of it is firms getting information through social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram. Next is bridging relationships. Relationships in a social network that connect otherwise disconnected people. These describe connections that link people across a cleavage that typically divides society, such as race or class or religion. It is, it is associations that bridge between communities, groups, or organizations. Next is structural holes. Social gaps between groups in a social network where there are few relationships bridging the groups. So here, structural hole is understood as a gap between two individuals who have complementary sources to information, or it refers to an empty space between contacts in a person's network. It means these contacts do not interact closely, though they are aware of one another. Lastly, closure. The degree to which all members of social network have relationships or ties with other group members. This means that everyone is connected such that no one can escape the notice of others. The next topic is the vital role of the technology in leveraging knowledge and human capital. Sharing knowledge and information throughout the organization can be a means of conserving resources, developing products and services, and creating new opportunities. The role of technology has successfully made the communication aspect much easier and better to us humans. By the help of technology, we can easily communicate by using emails and electronic teams. Example for email is Gmail, and example for electronic teams are MS Teams, Zoom, and Google Meet. The next topic is intellectual assets of the organization. Firms can use technology, attract human capital, or tap into research and design networks to get access to pretty much the same information as their competitors. To sustain competitive advantage, the company must protect their intellectual property. The management of intellectual property, patents, contracts with confidentiality, and non-compete clauses, copyrights, and the development of trademarks. Intellectual property rights. Intangible property owned by a firm in the forms of patents, copyrights, trademarks, or trade secrets. What is trade secrets? These are the private information that is important to a business because it gives the business a competitive advantage in its marketplace. If a trade secret is acquired by another company, it could harm the original holder. Example of it is the secret recipes for certain foods and beverages. Patent. Patent is a type of limited duration protection that can be used to protect inventions or discoveries that are new, non-obvious, and useful, such a new process, machine, article of manufacture, or composition of matter. When a property owner holds a patent, others are prevented under law from offering for sale, making, or using the product. Copyrights. Copyrights and patents are not the same thing. Although they are often confused, a copyright is a type of intellectual property protection that protect original works of authorship, which might include literary works, music, art, and more. Right now, copyrights also protect computer software and architecture. So, trademark. Trademark is a word, phrase, symbol, or a design that identifies and distinguishes the source of a good of one party from those others. Dynamic capabilities. It is the firm's ability to integrate, build, and reconfigure internal and external competencies to address rapidly changing environments. That's all my report. Thank you for listening.